Yo, hey guys, it's me, Anchor64 with another video. Man, it's pretty hot, right where I live, but whatever. So yeah, I thought why not actually continue my tanking series. So yeah, this will be the next in line. I forgot this is part 4 probably, but yeah, we'll see. I will see when I make the title and so on. So what this one will be about, you can actually see it in big bold letter. It's actually about the rotation. So this will be my warrior tank rotation guide, and I also made a sketch again, like my other video for DPS warrior. So I think that's more helpful actually than just going down the warhead guide, because it's a bit more visual. So yeah, rotation for tank warriors is like a bit more, I would say, complex and in-depth compared to DPS warriors. And there is a lot of stuff you can actually do that even starts before you even do a pull. So I will go in, like in this video, I will go over what you should do before you are actually pulling the boss, what preparations you should make, and then also, as well as some other stuff, and then actually when you pull the boss, what you should do, which abilities you should do, which abilities give you like the most threat, are like the most optimum ones, and so on. So yeah, that's pretty much what I will use. I looked up a lot of stuff, as well as used this warhead guide, the Fight Club Warrior Discord, which is also very helpful. And yeah, that's pretty much that. So again, if you like these kinds of videos, feel free to like and subscribe. I will do like more and more classic WoW related stuff. But other than that, let's actually go into the video. Start with the topic. So we have the rotation. The rotation is kind of different depending on which spec you are. We have two warrior specs, like two tank warrior specs in the game pretty much. There's also like never a third one, but that one you would only use in dungeons. But yeah, we pretty much have two. One is of course the deep protection warrior spec, and the other one, which is more common, is the fury prot one. I talked about why what the differences are in like another video. So in summary, however, it's pretty much if you want to get more threat, play fury prot. If you maybe your healers are struggling and so on, and your counters take a long time, and you don't have a lot of damage anyway, like your group, then you can go deep prot to make it a bit easier on your healers. But yeah, that's pretty much the difference. So deep prot does less threat. However, it's like more, you are more tanky, of course, and fury prot does a lot more threat, also a lot more damage. However, it's of course more squishy because you are using two one-handers and not a shield. But yeah, so there are different single target rotations, and that's pretty much what is listed here. You can see pretty much on number 1 for both of these is execute, and then it kind of changes a bit because of bloodthirst and shield slam. However, I pretty much made a sketch, which I will show you right now. So yeah, I made this. I think this is a bit easier because this guide doesn't really go into everything. It doesn't go into what you actually should do before you are going to pull the boss, unless I missed something, but I don't think it is mentioned here. So yeah, I will also talk about that. Right now in the game, the damage we do is a lot higher than we did in 2019. And of course way higher than we did in like 2004. So the need for more threat on warriors, on tanks, is like there's a lot bigger need of having more threat actually. So that's a very important issue we have. That's also why Fury Prot I think is pretty much way better than deep protection spec on like right now. Because of course we will have shorter encounters because we will have a lot more damage. However, we still need to do a lot more threat to actually catch up. Rank 14, like the way they made ranking a lot easier in the game pretty much caused that issue where a lot of warriors and so on get the PvP ranking gear, and that is very powerful. Like a lot of DPS get that, not only warriors, and it will cause a lot of threat. So yeah, but warriors are like the biggest offenders because we don't have any threat reduction. You can't use vanish or something like rogues, and if you want to use like the rage potions instead of lips, like limited invulnerability potions, yeah, that then we can get some problems with threat issues. So your job as a tank is pretty much get as much threat as you can, while still being able to tanky enough so you don't get one shot and your healers don't have issues healing you. So yeah, that's pretty much the thing you need to do. So right now, let's go over the pre-pull first. I could have made this a lot more complicated. I could have also included check your consumables, check you have everything and so on, check that you have your weapons, I don't know, sharpening stones and whatever, all of the things, but I didn't really yeah, write it on here because this is like only for your abilities pretty much. So yeah, and diamond flash is pretty much an ability. So first of all, what we want to do is we want to stack rage. One thing that is very important, however, is that we want to stack rage in defensive stance. One big problem we have with Fury Prot is that, first of all, we don't have, yeah, we can't really switch like stances a lot. We kind of lock to one, because we aren't talented like a deep protection warrior, so we can actually gain some rage when we switch stances. We don't have that. So we don't have this luxuriety, so that's why we want to prepare. We want to stand in defensive stance even beforehand. Because let's say you farm all your rage in battle stance and you switch over, you have 0 rage. So yeah, try to stack rage in defensive stance, of course. Another thing which we can also use is to keep our rage a bit longer is actually to use blood rage before we even pull. Because what blood rage does, it does put us in combat and also gives us some rage. However, since we are in combat for a short time, our rage doesn't really decay. So maybe you didn't really know that, but if you are in combat, your rage doesn't decay. So we can abuse that. That can be, however, kind of annoying for your group and so on, because then you will be in combat and healers and so on can regen. But yeah, that's another thing we want to do. Another thing I could have mentioned is charge. So yeah, on pull I could have mentioned this here. However, charge is kind of inconsistent. Generally, in my opinion, I think it's pretty much like there are some, like, it pretty much changes on the situation. On some boss fights you can charge, on some trash you can obviously charge, but yeah, it's kind of pretty inconsistent. It's like, actually, I think in my opinion also way better to just pull the boss and do some damage that way, because if you charge, sometimes you will overcharge the boss, and what will happen is you will need to run back to the boss. While at the meantime, some DPS are maybe on the boss and they already start attacking the boss, and you know how DPS are, they don't really wait for you and they will get clapped. So that's why charge, for example, is not really mentioned here. Another thing, charge is also kind of useless for us when we play Fury Prot, because when we charge and we swap stances, we will lose the rage anyway. So yeah, that's not really, unless we use some macro. I showed that in one video, where you can actually charge in any stance, but that is kind of finicky to use. I would only recommend that maybe using it on trash. So yeah. First thing definitely we want to use is we want to stack rage. So we have some, we can just immediately spam our abilities when the boss fight starts. Another big important thing is we want to have a healing set. What I mean by that is having a set which has a lot of healing spells on it. So actually let me, maybe I can find something. Yeah, probably maybe this one. But yeah, that's like a thing you want to have, like some healing done, increased healing done by spells and so on. Or on here you can see plus 33 healing spells as an enchantment. We definitely want to have a set. How much we have is of course depending on how much gear you can get, but that is very, very helpful to actually have more survivability, and that's also another reason I will mention in a bit, which is even, I think, also very, very important. But yeah, you can just grab some healing gear in your raids, which no one really wants. As far as we have the luxuriety, we can pretty much wear anything. So if the paladins don't want it, you can pretty much use the plate healing gear, and also you can get some very easy healing gear, for example, by doing AV, being exalted. You can pick up this, for example, which gives you like 53 healing on your offhand. And if you did the rank 14 grind, you can pick up, I think, 2 of the healing maces, which gives you a gigantic amount of healing. I think one of the warriors in our guild, he's maybe also watching this, so yeah, will be probably watching this as well. He has, I think, like 850 healing, and that is very, very insane. So if you don't know what Diamond Flask does, pretty much what you do is you swap to your healing set, you activate Diamond Flask, and then you swap back to your normal gear. What will happen is you will get the benefit, the healing benefit of your healing set, and you will get healed by that amount, actually, by how much healing power you have. Yeah, pretty much by that. So if you have 850 healing, like one of my mates in my guild has, he gets 850 healing every 5 seconds. But this will lead to, of course, you will have more survivability, as well, you get a lot of threat as well. Yeah, not a lot, but you will get some amount of threat as well, because healing also causes threat. So this is another additional bonus, and of course, we will have 75 strength. Tanks kind of work differently than DPS warriors. Like, with DPS warriors, we want to make sure, for example, that our buffs have pretty much the whole, like, last for the whole duration, especially of the whole duration in the execute phase. So for example, you wouldn't use Diamond Flask, like, let's say the fight takes 80 seconds, and you would only use Diamond Flask and the boss is only like 60 seconds or so are remaining. But for tanks, it's very important that we get a lot of threat at the beginning, because there are 2 phases, and I will talk about the other one, where it is very substantial that we get a lot of threat. And the first phase is right when the boss fight starts. In between that is pretty much smooth sailing, so that's easier, of course, unless something goes wrong. But other than that, that's like the hardest points. We can actually get threat right at the start, and there will be another phase where I will talk about later. So yeah. Actually, let me show you how that works with the flash set. So I will go into in-game for that. So let me actually switch over. I have my game open right now. I think I have. So yeah, I have my game open right now. So this is my warrior. Right now I'm using my normal gear. I'm using an add-on item rack, where I have some like sets, and you can actually bind them to a button, which I did. So I bind my healing set to F12. So this is this one. I'm not tanking, pretty much tanking my guilds. So yeah, my healing set isn't the best. Actually, I think I'm missing also some items which I put in my bank, but whatever. So yeah, this set only has like 188 healing power. However, I have some things in my bank, so I think my healing power is actually like 300 something. And you can see, like, with some add-ons, with extended character stats, for example, you can see like the healing power amount. And what I will do is I will use my Diamond Flask right now. And now I will switch back. And you will see right here on the screen, I'm healing for 179 healing. So yeah, that's pretty much that. So you will heal for that amount of healing power. Yeah, which is very, very useful. Every 5 seconds for 60 seconds. And as you can see, if you have a lot of healing gear, this is actually a ton. So yeah, let's say maybe you get 1000 healing on your gear. I don't know if that's even possible, but then you would heal for 1000 every 5 seconds, which is really insane. There's also, you can actually solo some stuff as warriors, but yeah. So yeah, now you saw how it works. Pretty much you need kind of an add-on to have different sets, so you can switch back and forth, which makes this a lot easier. So yeah, item rack is one add-on I would recommend, but there are probably also others. So okay. Before the pull starts, you have like a lot of rage stacked, you have your flash set, you have activated, of course, you have 60 seconds remaining. This really lasts a very long time, and you will have a lot of healing. So now we will go into actually pulling the boss. Now you could actually charge. However, if you have a lot of rage already and are in defensive stance, of course you don't want to do that, because you will lose all of your rage. Then when you are pulling, you can actually activate Death Wish just right before, which will give us a nice big damage increase. And again, like I said, this is very, very important that we have a lot of damage at the start, so we can actually have some threat lead. Because right when you are starting, a lot of things are pretty much competing with our threat at the start, because we didn't do really any damage. Maybe a heal got casted before we actually were on the boss, so the healer has actually the threat, and then can go all haywire. Maybe one of your warlocks casted a shadow bolt and it critted. Then everything can go pretty much, yeah, it can lead to chaos very, very quickly. So you want to also make sure that you are the first on the boss. So I need to be kind of fast for that as well. Another thing we can do is Sapper, so we can also use that. And one like optional thing, so that's why the stars here, is Recklessness. Death Wish, if you use it, we lose some armor, which is unfortunate. However, Recklessness is even more riskier. We get a lot more damage taken in, so yeah, we need to really consider that. However, if we really, really want the threat at the start, we can of course cast Recklessness, but I would try to communicate with your healers that you are casting Recklessness, so they, like, you don't get really one-shot and the healers aren't prepared for that, so yes, that can be very, very risky. But yeah, Recklessness is kind of an optional thing. Maybe on things like Valor Stress, it can be very useful. That's one boss where threat is an issue, can be an issue, so yeah, you need to consider that. Yeah, but Death Wish can pretty much pop it. You will get more damage, like you will take more damage of course, but the amount of damage you can actually do, like additional damage, is worth it. So yeah, that's one thing. Another thing, of course, Sapper. If you are an engineer, you can use that as a start. Some additional really nice snap threat. We really want to make sure that we have a lot of threat at the start. So we want to build our threat lead as soon as possible, because we can't really rely on our DPS to wait. You can say, okay, wait some seconds, I need to get some threat. But yeah, you know how it is with DPS, they always want to zag, so zug, and that can be very, very annoying to deal with. So you need to make sure to have some big threat lead right at the start. And these things, like all of these, pretty much help us with that. So we use Death Wish, we use Sapper, we stack Rage, we use Diamond Flask, and then we can actually do some damage like against the boss. Next thing, let's actually look at the rotation. So that's actually like the main thing I want to talk about. So first of all, we have the things that we want to use on CD. What this means is pretty much on cooldown. So this would mean Shield Block and Shield Slam. If we are Deep Protection, we want to pretty much use these on cooldown. What Shield Block does, it massively decreases, like, pretty much this very strong mitigation ability, and it guarantees also that we pretty much can cast a Revenge. So yeah, we definitely want to have this on cooldown. Next thing is Shield Slam. Shield Slam is actually pretty good, I would say. Pretty good ability. It causes a lot of threat, it deals decent damage, and yeah, definitely want to have this on cooldown. But what we are probably more interested in is the Fury Prot rotation. So if we have Fury Prot, we of course don't use Shield Block, so that's why they are together, and this symbol is here. What we will use instead is pretty much Bloodthirst. So yeah, we want to use Bloodthirst on cooldown. You can use Bloodthirst on any stance. I think they changed that in later expansions, but yeah, so pretty much use Bloodthirst in your defensive stance, you will be good. One reason, of course, is also why we want to use in defensive stance, we will have a higher threat modifier. I think it's 1.2, I think I showed this on another video. So this will also increase our threat. So yeah, we definitely want to use like Bloodthirst in defensive stance, of course. And another thing is Revenge. Revenge is a very cheap ability. If you are tanking, you will pretty much also have this available pretty much all the time. Even if you are Fury Prot, you will tank, you will parry, you will dodge. You can do that with two one-handers. You can't block, of course, but still you can parry on dodge, and this will also proc this. It does a good amount of damage, it's very cheap, and it does a lot of threat. So that's why we definitely want to use this as well every time it procs. Other than that, we have some filler abilities. So let's say all of these are on cooldown, or we can't really use this because we didn't parry or dodge. Then we want to use Thunder Armor, actually. Yeah, that's the next best thing we can use. Now you would maybe ask yourself, okay, why is there Battle Shot on here? If you don't know why that is the case, sometimes when you have a rogue that gives like improved exposed armor, which is a debuff which is very similar to thunder armor. It decreases the armor of the enemy, but improved exposed armor is actually a higher armor reduction, which means we can't use thunder armor. In these cases, if you have someone who applies that, that is a very strong debuff. So yeah, definitely, it's very good if you have it. You can use Battle Shout instead as a filler ability. One thing that is also very special about Battle Shout. So what Battle Shout does, you of course give everyone like a buff in your group. However, depending on how many people you buff in your group, you actually also get some threat. So you will see some warriors, especially on AoE pools, spamming this to get some threat. It really depends how many group members you can buff with this. That's like one thing. There are a lot of things which cause threat. I talked about this in another video, but not only damage causes threat and things like taunt, but also things like heals, things like giving people buffs. Also, of course, is all going into the threat calculation. So yeah, that's why Battle Shout is actually a pretty good spell to get some additional threat. One thing, however, you need to consider, if you have, let's say you have another warrior in your group, and he casted, before maybe the boss fight started, he switched to his tier 2 gear and he casted Battle Shout. What will happen is, you also won't be able to use Battle Shout. So yeah, that's another thing, because his Battle Shout is pretty much a higher attack bonus, attack power bonus, so you can't override it, which can grief you. So you definitely want to make sure that when you have other warriors in your group, and if you are tanking, that they don't use tier 2 gear, the tier 2 set, or else they will override your Battle Shout, or maybe they just shouldn't use Battle Shout at all. That's one thing. Another thing is, with the upcoming AQ release, we will get some books we can drop. I think they drop in AQ 20, which can upgrade some of our abilities. And one of these books is also Battle Shout. And that will also increase the attack power bonus. So if you have a warrior that has that book learned in your group and he casts Battle Shout, same situation. So yeah. But you could also, like another ability, you could maybe use this Hamstring. Also a very cheap ability would be another filler ability you can use if you can't use both of these maybe. Which is probably a pretty rare occasion, but yeah. So also let's go next to our next thing we can talk about is dumping rage. So even with all of that, we will still have some rage, a lot of rage. The thing is, if you are tanking, especially if you have all the ward buffs, right now as 3 warriors, even if we are DPSing, we will have like almost, our rage bar will be almost full all the time, or just with 1 or 2 auto attacks, because we have such a high crit chance and we do a lot of damage, of course. And this is even more amplified if you are tanking, because you are getting hit as well and you get rage from that as well. So we will have a lot of rage, so we need to kind of dump it. How we dump it is by using Heroic Strike, of course. Heroic Strike causes also a lot of threat. We always kind of want to use Heroic Strike, but you need to be careful. One thing you definitely don't want to happen is that you rage stuff yourself by using Heroic Strike. So that's also why it's a bit lower, or not like one of the top things. Of course, if you have everything buffed, everything is going good, you can cast this like permanently, kind of. But still, you need to be careful that you don't rage stuff yourself, because yeah, that can be very problematic. So you need to be kinda careful of using that. If you are AoEing, of course, you want to use Cleave instead. If you want to have like multiple, if you want to tank multiple enemies, so I would use Cleave instead of Heroic Strike. But yeah, below 20%, everything changes again. So you can also like kind of ignore everything again. Like all of this doesn't matter anymore. Let me. No, actually, can't I draw or whatever? Ah. I need to change the color, I think. Let me change it to, I want red. Yeah. So yeah, all of this won't matter anymore. This looks very weird, whatever. Because what we will do is we want to go into battle stance. So that sounds kind of strange. And we want to use execute. So we will spam execute similar to as in DPS warrior. Why is that the case? So now let me explain something. So I talked beforehand I talked about like 2 phases where our threat is at most needed and pretty much like the most important thing. And the first phase was right at the start where we can get overtaken by different DPS. DPS is maybe, like I said, like a warlock maybe crits with a shadow bolt, or you DPS, or you can't get to the boss fast enough. Maybe like on Brute Lords you get slowed by the debuff and another DPS is faster, or one caster or whatever, or healing stuff. So yeah, that's one thing where it can get very chaotic. That's also why we want to activate all of the buffs. Another situation is when the boss is below 20%, because that's when warriors will start to use execute, and execute, of course, you will do a lot more damage on this in this phase, and every warrior will spam execute, and they will do yeah, of course they will, like I said, a lot of damage, and you need to be still ahead of them, because if you don't, what will happen is, of course, one of the warriors will pull threat from you, and then you are kind of screwed. It is more difficult, of course, for this to happen than instead of it happening on the start, because, like, again, you have a pretty big threat lead if you are doing everything correctly, and even if someone is close to you, they will still need to overtake you by a lot. But if they maybe get, I don't know, if they are very, very strong pumper, if they do a lot of damage and they don't really watch their threat meter, what can happen, they can overtake you in execute phase. So that's what you want to do, is you want to switch to battle stand and you want to cast execute as well and spam it as well. Why don't we use berserking stance? Berserking stance, you will get like more damage, you will take more damage, and that's what we don't want. We don't want to make it harder for our healers, and you don't want to risk that. Battle stance is fine enough. And another thing which is also very important is we will also get less threat, like, because battle stance has a lower threat modifier than defensive stance, but still the amount of damage we can do with execute, especially as a fury prot, is very, very high. So that pretty much overtakes that. So that's why we want to use execute. We can do a lot of damage also in this this phase, because also we are getting attacked, so we can even cast more executes. We will have a lot of rage, and our executes will hit like a truck. So yeah, that's the thing. We want to switch to battle stance. We want to spam execute, similar as in DPS warrior, which would do the same thing but just in berserker stance. So yeah. One thing you don't want to do, and that is very, very important, maybe you, because you played a lot of DPS warrior, maybe you are thinking, okay, maybe I also need to do the same rotation kind of, even if I play, like if I play Fury Prot, because it's in the name, Fury, which would be using Whirlwind. So that is, however, one thing you don't want to do. If you are single target, like this rotation, I didn't mention it here, but this is pretty much for single target. You don't want to switch to Berserker stance and use Whirlwind. That is very, very risky, and yeah, that can lead to a lot of stuff which isn't very good. Because like Berserker stance, you get a lot more damage, and I wouldn't say you can get one shot. Maybe you get, if you get very unlucky, but yeah, definitely don't want to do that. It's not really worth it, especially if you play Fury Prot, because you need to switch stances again. If you play a tank, and if you are tanking berserking stance, you are pretty much making a very, very big mistake. First of all, you are getting less threat because you are not in defensive stance, which increases your threat regeneration. Another thing is you will make it very, very hard, way harder on your healers, because you will take a lot more damage in. Yeah, so don't do that. Stay in defensive stance for most of the fight. In the execute phase, which is pretty much a very short one, way shorter than the rest of the fight, you can switch to battle stance and use some executes. But if you see maybe your warriors aren't like really overtaking you, you can pretty much stay in defensive stance and chill and just do that. But yeah, that's pretty much that. So that's the rotation. Some additional stuff is, of course, if you if you need to AoE tank something. AoE tanking in general for warriors is pretty poor. Unless you have Thunder Fury, then it becomes way better, because the proc gives you a lot of threat. But if you don't have Thunder Fury, it's very, very annoying actually. Deep Rot has some more benefits on that, because they have like a reduced taunt amount and stuff like that. So it's a bit easier for them. That's also why like tanking as a deep protection warrior is way better for dungeons than Fury Prot. Fury Prot pretty much sucks in dungeons. It's very, very annoying. But yeah, the best one would be like, I think, like an arms tank with a two-hander for dungeons. If you can actually have a very, very good healer that can keep you topped. But yeah, for AoE stuff, of course, we can use Challenging Shot, which is an ability which pretty much taunts every enemy around us for like, I think, 5 seconds, if I remember right. And yeah, it would force every enemy to attack us. However, I would also always kind of call this out. Many times if I used it, if things went haywire in the raid, in ZG or something, I used this, I was like immediately dead after 2 seconds, because of course I didn't say anything and the healers I was pretty much surprised, and then yeah, I get clapped. But yeah, definitely try to call it off if you are going to use this, because you will take a lot more damage, because every single mob will attack you. Other things, of course, Sappers. Sappers are huge for AoE tanking, so if you are an engineer, definitely 100% use them if you AoE tank stuff. Other than that, I talked about this, like you can use Battle Shout, or you can use Demo Shout, which is also very good for AoE tanking, to get a lot of AoE threat. Then of course we have Cleave, and also like Whirlwind, but you would need to swap stances for that. This can be kind of annoying. Yeah, like one thing you can do for dungeons, for example, if you have the arms back, pretty much what your rotation would look like is you would charge in, swap to Berserker stance, do a Whirlwind, of course have also sweeping strikes up, and then you pretty much have threat of everything. Then you can go into defensive stance again and do your like your normal stuff. But yeah, that's like for dungeons and such. Yeah, AoE tanking is one thing that warriors really lack on, unless they have really Thunder Fury. With Thunder Fury makes it a lot easier. But yeah, that's pretty much that. Other than that, I think I kinda summarized everything pretty much. There are of course other additional things, like I didn't mention Hamstring. You can use like Charge as well in some situations. What else can you use? Let me think about it. But yeah, things like that pretty much. I didn't talk about your consumables. You can use like things like I could have mentioned it here, but you can use, of course, Stone Shield potions, which give you some additional armor. But yeah, your job as a tank, you have 2 jobs pretty much. The first one is, of course, having enough threat, so no other DPS is pretty much getting the boss on. The other thing is staying alive, so having as much mitigation and health that you can actually stay alive. That's kind of a balancing thing you need to do, where you need to consider, okay, which pieces are like, which gear is more threat orientated, and which gear is more mitigation orientated. Which things do I need? Maybe you have a lot of threat, maybe your DPS aren't pumping as hard, then you can just go for more mitigation. Maybe you have the opposite issue, which I think a lot of people will have or have, because like there's a lot more like DPS in the game right now. Then you will need to consider, okay, I need more threat gear. I need to like also bring like the healers up to par, so they actually are prepared for that as well, because you will take more damage with threat gear. Get all the wall buffs, things like that. Use more consumables. Like there are a lot of ways to increase your threat. A lot of it is actually preparation. Rotation, of course, also matters a lot for that. So you don't, of course, use the wrong rotation. So things like don't use like Whirlwind when you are tanking. So that's one thing. Yeah, if you are single target tanking, don't go in Berserker stance and cast Whirlwind. That's a huge waste. But yeah. But other than that, there are like other ways you can, most of the stuff you can pretty much do beforehand. So you definitely want to have everything up, every wall buff and everything. So, but yeah, I hope this was kind of helpful for you and useful for you. Maybe this helped you think about rotation a bit. Tanking rotation is a bit weird and complex, and there are a lot of different opinions, especially things like thunder armor. Should you like spam thunder armor at the start as a tank? In my personal opinion, I would say no, especially if I have every ward buff, everything. I think that's way more useful to actually like use blood first and do normal rotation. That's like a lot more threat. Like imagining if you are starting the boss fight and you are just spamming thunders at the start. You will get overtaken, I think, by your DPS very easily. So I definitely don't do that. Thunder is nice, but that's pretty much the job of your DPS warriors to cast it. To keep it up. Your job is pretty much doing the most amount of damage at the start. So you will have enough of a threat lead so you can actually chill. Actually, I can draw this a bit. So, right at the start, I don't know why it's like this. So that's like where that's where it's the most critical, that you get a lot of threat. Then you will kind of chill a bit. This looks very weird, I think, like this tool. But yeah, you can chill a bit. And what you will have is then at the execute phase, you can get some additional problems again. Because Fury Voice are going to do a lot of damage, they will pop all their cooldowns, and then can become kinda risky again. Maybe someone can overtake you. So that's where you actually need to consider again to do anything else. But yeah. In the middle, it's pretty much smooth sailing. If you have enough of a threat lead, then it's pretty chill. You don't really need to focus on much, just on the mechanics of the boss. Of course, what can happen is that the boss resets its aggro. A lot of bosses have that mechanic. Then becomes very important. Then that you are very fast. Use things like for taunt, if you can taunt the boss. If not, be the first one to cast some blood first, or one of the globals that can give you some snap threat. Maybe use the Sepper again, things like that, so you can get some additional threat again. You have some tools that DPS warriors don't have, which give you some additional threat. Things like defensive stance, which gives you more threat. Things like talents, of course, that give you some additional threat. But yeah. And also, if you're an alliance player, you definitely don't want to have salvation on your tanks. That's a pretty big grief. So definitely also have a macro that disables that if you are tanking, which will make it also easier for your paladins to buff everyone. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. Yeah, I think this video is a bit shorter than the other ones, but yeah, I hope this was helpful for you. Maybe you learned something. If you have anything else to say, feel free to comment. If you like this video, feel free to like and subscribe, and we will see you on the next one. Goodbye.